bad wrestling is obviously the best kind of wrestling, but great wrestling can be worth watching too. Honest. NXT's TakeOver events are now synonymous with great matches, having built up one hell of a legacy over the years by showcasing barn burner after barn burner. With so many bangers on offer, inevitably some of them can get lost in the 5-star shuffle. So for all you wannabe Dave Meltzers out there, here are some perhaps slightly forgotten NXT TakeOver matches for you to savor, rate, and add to your spreadsheets. Losers. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 overlooked NXT TakeOver classics. Join us. Number 10, Adrian Neville vs Tyson Kidd from the very first NXT TakeOver. We start with a belter from the inaugural TakeOver event, snappily titled, NXT TakeOver, as Adrian Neville defended his NXT title against Tyson Kidd. Back then, the takeovers were much more scaled down affairs, sort of like an extended version of the TV show, with the emphasis very much on the wrestling. And if you want top-notch wrestling, who better to turn to than Neville and Kidd, two well-polished, all-round hybrid athletes. The pair put on a great match that beautifully blended high-flying, strikes, submissions, and crucially, storytelling. They put it all on the line, and it was counter after counter and near fall after near fall in the closing stretch, with the man that gravity forgot managing to hit a huge top rope Frankensteiner, followed by the Red Arrow to retain. The post-match saw the winner offer the loser a consolatory handshake, only to be given the cold shoulder, setting up future appetizing matches between the pair. Also worth checking out from that first takeover is Tyler Breeze's spirited #1 contenders win over Sami Zayn. Number 9, Asuka vs Mickie James from NXT TakeOver Toronto. Asuka was supposed to defend the NXT Women's title against Trish Stratus at NXT TakeOver Toronto on November 19th, 2016, but Trish's pregnancy put a stop to that and necessitated a substitute. Drafting in her old frenemy and former women's and divas champion Mickie James, WWE made the best of the situation and created an intriguing first-time matchup. This was James's first WWE match in over 6 years, and she really took it to the Empress of Tomorrow, beginning with some nice chain wrestling exchanges as the two felt each other out and sought the advantage. It started off respectful and even tempered, but soon boiled over as it spilled to the floor, where James hit a beautiful Hurricane Rana and Asuka nailed a German suplex. Mickie looked like she had it won with a spinning kick, but Asuka managed to get the ropes and then rallied and slapped on the Asuka lock for the tap out. This was a really interesting dynamic, and Mickie looked great in her return, giving the champion a proper challenge and forcing her to raise her game after having steamrolled through the competition to that point. Number 8, Bayley vs Nia Jax from NXT TakeOver London. Sometimes the best stories in wrestling are the simplest ones. Good versus evil, right versus wrong, big versus little. Bayley's defense of the NXT Women's title at TakeOver London in December 2015 was brilliant because of its simplicity. It was the plucky babyface against the towering heel, as Bayley needed to use her speed and skill to counteract Nia's power and strength. Every time the hugger was able to gain some sort of momentum, she was swatted down and leveled with a big power move like a Samoan drop or a leg drop, or 3. It was the old Sting versus Vader formula, albeit with a modern twist, and like the Stinger, Bayley never gave up and kept firing back and picking her spots whenever she saw an opening. Her strategy of doggedly going for a guillotine choke paid off as she was finally able to lock it in properly, forcing her far larger opponent to finally tap out after a surprisingly great match. Nia Jax sure gets her fair bit of stick at times, but performances like this prove how effective she can be when positioned in the right way and with a complementary opponent. Number 7, Hideo Itami vs Bobby Roode at NXT TakeOver Chicago. While on his day, the man also known as Kenta is one of the most explosive workers in the business, his NXT run was hampered by injuries and apathy, and he rarely got the chance to show what he was truly capable of. One match that shows the best of Itami was his NXT title match with Robert Roode from NXT TakeOver Chicago, which went down on May 20th, 2017 in front of a raucous crowd. The work here was tight, and the two didn't hold back when it came to the strikes. The main story of the match was the two men trying to put the other away with their finisher, as Roode consistently went for the glorious DDT and Itami attempted the GTS. Adding to the drama was the damage done to Roode's arm, which hampered his ability to land that knockout blow, as well as the constant go-to-sleep escapes. Even when Itami managed to hit it, Roode was able to roll out of the ring and narrowly avoid defeat. Roode fought through through the pain and finally hit the glorious DDT, holding on and rolling through with it to hit another in order to make doubly sure that he retained the title. Number 6, Sasha Banks vs Becky Lynch from NXT TakeOver Unstoppable. Oh, I've heard these two are quite good. This match was a great example of everything that was good about the NXT women's division back then, which was firing on all cylinders and gave WWE audiences a glimpse of what to expect in the future. Not merely taking up a space on the card, performers like Banks, Lynch, Paige, Charlotte, Bayley and Emma were often involved in the best matches of the night, and their combined efforts made the NXT women's title truly mean something. Though Lynch and Banks were both works in progress, they knew who they were at the time and could tell a great story in the ring. That story here was the cocky and confident champion Banks trying to immobilize and wear down the fiery Lynch, focusing her attack on her opponent's arm. The bout built and built, and they kept the audience guessing with some close submissions until the boss was able to lock in the Banks statement for a hard-fought victory. They've had bigger and better matches against each other since, but do not sleep on this one. You could see that they were going to be something truly special one day. Number 5, Adrian Neville vs Tyson Kidd vs Sami Zayn vs Tyler Breeze at NXT TakeOver Fatal 4-Way. You look at that lineup and you know that it's gonna be, at the very least, very bloody good. Still, 4-ways are always a tricky prospect, and despite the ridiculous level of talent on display, the main event of TakeOver 4-Way could have been a mess if everyone wasn't hitting their cues. Thankfully though, it was not, as all 4 men brought it and made the most of the liberal amount of time that they were given, about 25 minutes. It wasn't just a spot fest either, as there was genuine drama surrounding who was going to come out as champion, as the odds were stacked against Neville and they expertly teased a title switch several times. The climax was sensational too, with Sami laying everyone out and looking to have the thing won, only to be stopped at the last fraction of a second when Neville pulled the referee out and dumped Zayn, allowing the champion to hit Kidd with a red arrow for a big win for him, but an equally crushing loss for the underdog from the underground. This started out relatively reserved, but kicked off in a big way and didn't slow down until the thrilling finale. Number 4, Tyler Breeze vs Jushin Liger at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. Judged as just a match removed from its context, Tyler Breeze vs Jushin Liger would be deemed merely okay. Acceptable, decent, good enough for government work, and so on. But context is everything, and it's the story surrounding the match that makes this one great. It may not be a classic on the same level as some of the great matches from TakeOvers past, but it's perfect for what it is. And what it is Jushin Thunder Liger at 50 years old, wrestling in his first and only WWE match. The junior heavyweight legend is one of the best to ever lace up a pair of boots, and the Brooklyn crowd, keenly aware of his exceptional career, were thrilled to see him. The ideal way to kick off what proved to be a historic show, Liger did his greatest hits and Breeze held his own and looked like the star in making that he truly was. And really, any match that involves the former IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion interacting with a furry selfie stick is one worth watching out of curiosity, if nothing else. WWE made the right call in putting the Hall of Famer over with his patented Liger bomb, music to the ears of an unbelievably hot Brooklyn crowd. Number 3, Andrade Cien Almas vs Roderick Strong at NXT TakeOver San Antonio. Roderick Strong has been one of the workhorses of NXT for years now, and Andrade Cien Almas looked like a surefire future megastar on the black and gold brand before he was promoted, lost 2/3 of his name, and rather puzzlingly, wasn't used much before deciding to try his luck elsewhere. NXT TakeOver San Antonio, taking place the night before the 2017 Royal Rumble, wasn't the strongest takeover ever, with Robert Roode's NXT title victory over Shinsuke Nakamura being the big highlight, while everything else was sort of just there. Everything besides Strong vs Andrade anyway, as they perked the Texas crowd up with a surly back and forth scrap that featured all of the hard-hitting wrestling you would expect from these two. I mean, they really laid them in here, seriously. Andrade focused on working the arm, including trapping Strong in an armbar while hung up on the ropes, while Strong nailed several of his punishing backbreakers, including a particularly evil one on the top turnbuckle. While there were enough falsies to keep people guessing as to the outcome, they wisely finished things up at the peak, as Roderick hit the sick kick for the 3 at just a shade under 12 minutes. Number 2, The Revival vs American Alpha at NXT TakeOver Dallas. NXT TakeOver Dallas was a very special show full of amazing matches, and the tone was set from the off, with American Alpha challenging the Revival for the NXT Tag Team titles in the opener. Two of NXT's best ever tag teams, Dash and Dawson and Gable and Jordan, gelled seamlessly as the amateur specialists tried to out-wrestle the old-school bruisers. The early exchanges on the mat were as smooth as silk before American Alpha picked up the pace with some nice stereo offense, including a picture-perfect double dropkick and mirror-image German suplexes. After the babyfaces had shined, it was time for the heels to seize control, and they isolated Gable. From there, it was classic tag team formula all the way. Even one pretty noticeable botch couldn't dampen things, as Gable finally made the hot tag and Jordan cleaned house, leading to some very close false finishes. The actual finish, with Jordan getting a blind tag and surprising Dawson with a spear, leading to the grand amplitude, was masterful and ensured that the title switch happened in the best way possible. I tell you what, these boys can tag team me anytime. Number 1, Adrian Neville versus Sami Zayn at NXT TakeOver R Evolution. It was a simple story going into it, with Zayn having been portrayed as the perpetual bridesmaid in his pursuit of the title, with his one-time friend Neville becoming something of a tweener as he stuck the knife in and reminded him of his previous failures. On the big night, they didn't rush things and kept the pace even early on, sticking to basic but effective wrestling before upping the tempo as the bout wore on. The champion appeared to be employing more of a ground game than usual, using more strikes and power moves than he often would and limiting the amount of time he spent in the air. Zayn kept plugging away and fighting back, hitting some spectacular moves of his own. Their familiarity showed as there were counters and counters to counters, one of which resulted in a great innocuous looking ref bump as Neville flew backwards on a kickout and cracked heads with the counting official. After an exhausting closing spring where all the heavy artillery came out, Zayn hit the haluva kick to finally bag the gold as the roof came off of Full Sail. The post-match celebration, followed by Kevin Owens turning on Zayn to set up their program, was the icing on a delectable pro wrestling cake.